Mm,
Here
mm.
we go. We're live, Timothy. Good morning, Timothy. How are you
Good
today?
morning, Maya. Good morning, everybody who's tuned in.
Well, it's nice to see you. I can see that you're back in Katsuyama.
I'm on the good
So,
ship Santana in the port of Katsuyama. Yes,
how about that? How's the weather there?
it's overcast. It's a little bit chilly. It rained yesterday. It might rain a little bit more today. So let's just see how things develop. But first of
Okay,
all, Japanese politics one-on-one.
yes, indeed, with the great intro made for us by Richard Berger. And of
Thank you
course, with
very much for
you,
that, Richard.
Langley. Yes, thank you, Richard. And with you, Timothy. Timothy Langley of Langley Esquire, the public affairs agency in Tokyo, the only one, right? Yes. Okay. So, Timothy, thank you for this morning again for getting ready. And we're here once again with the weekly briefing on what happened in Japanese politics during the past 1 week. Without any further ado, I don't want to keep anybody waiting. Let's start. The floor is
Let's
yours.
get started. That's right.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Maya, and thank you very much to the audience for joining us every week. This is like our 61st consecutive Sunday on providing an update on what's going on in Japanese politics. We try and be concise and talk about those things that are important to you. We have about a 30-minute briefing, and then we open up the floor. Uh, the first part of that is live streamed on LinkedIn, and then the second part we do the Q&A in Clubhouse. But all of it is com- compiled by Maya and uploaded onto YouTube. Isn't that right, Maya? So when people want to look at that, I guess they go to Japan Expert Insights and type that into your YouTube search, and they come up. A lot of your stuff comes up, right? Okay, your microphone is off. Okay,
Sorry.
there
Yes.
you
A lot
go.
of stuff comes up. Yes. And there are a lot of videos there, more than 60 already. So if anybody wants to follow what happened in Japanese politics since last year, February, well, everything is there. So today is the next
And
episode.
that's right. And just to give people a sense of the audience coverage, we have a really good, strong following, a strong base. Over the last year, it's developed consistently. We have, I don't know, Maya, maybe you can go over the numbers, but when we launch immediately on Clubhouse, we probably have, in the course of the briefing, maybe 60 or 70 people sign up, and then there are another maybe 60 or 70 that watch the YouTube video in its entirety. And I'm not sure what the numbers, the analytics are on LinkedIn. That's harder to
Yeah.
follow, but it's going
Yes.
it's going very well, and a lot of apparently policy wonks and Japan hands are in the audience. So I very much appreciate that.
Yes, me too. We have about the same number on LinkedIn as well. So yes, about 60, between 60 and 70 per week.
Okay,
And let's see what happens this week. So
thank you.
that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maya. So the big news today is Joe Biden is on his way. He spent the last 2 days in South Korea speaking with their new president, and the component of Quad that Japan plays, and by association, what South Korea is going to play, is very critical. So when the new president of South Korea was elected, it was um, a little bit of a tension here in Japan and also in the United States, because the former administration was not particularly Japan friendly. I think it could be said that it was relatively unfriendly. And also the relations with the United States were not so great. But under the auspices of Quad and what's going on in North Korea, what's going on in China, there is a huge drive to pull the region together. And that is the underlying reason for Quad. India, Australia, the United States, and Japan. But for the United States, the fact that Japan and Korea have a little bit of quite a bit of tension still left over is a troubling issue. That has some. There are indications that that will be addressed with the new president, Mr. Yoon, and that's why Joe Biden went to visit him 2 days there. I think they are on the way to Tokyo now. They'll arrive today. They'll spend Monday and Tuesday. Monday is devoted to meetings with Kishida, and then Tuesday is devoted to the Quad meeting that will be held here in downtown Tokyo. There are a couple of other interesting things going on in the background related to Quad, but also just related to US Japan. And you can expect Joe Biden to be signing and making pronouncements on several initiatives that are going on. One of the more exciting is a plan that was announced just last week to include a Japanese astronaut on a moon landing, probably within this decade. So that's a big deal. The initiatives between Japan and the United States are beginning to really flourish. There was a little bit of tension there. You might remember during the Abe administration on trade issues, on the pullout of TPP by the United States by President Trump. A lot of tension going on there. Pay your own way. You need to pay for more of what the United States is covering. This kind of claim that was made. So it did put the relationship a bit on tenterhooks, but now that seems to be really kind of going by the wayside. The United States and Japan are really going full bore on creating not only tighter economic and diplomatic relations, but also military, and also this initiative with space. This is a big deal, and it's a big deal for a lot of different reasons. One of the I think the reasons why the inclusion of Japan and the mention of having a Japanese astronaut. Can you imagine what a hero this guy will be, and how many television shows he will be able to sponsor after he comes back from landing on the moon? So the idea is not just that he's going to be a part of this this new space program that is replacing the Apollo program, but he's also going to be landing on the moon. So this is a really big deal. It's a big feather in the cap for Japan, and it will promote and accelerate Japan's energy and devotion to developing space as a viable frontier for trade and economic development. So please look forward to that. That's going to be a big deal. The other thing that the president is coming to Japan to sign off on is the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. So this is a new initiative. It is not quite the flavor of the month. I think it's much more serious than that. The United States and this region in particular really need to come together for a kind of a cohesive front to combat potential Chinese incursions. And these incursions, they're not imaginary. There is a Chinese intelligence ship that is going up and down the coast of Australia. There was a battleship that passed through the straits between Okinawa and the main island of Honshu just this last week. So these things are very provocative. They are unusual. This has never happened in Australia, that an intelligence gathering ship was going up and down the coast, and have a Chinese battleship traverse the straits there. It is not illegal. It's still in international waters, but it is very provocative at this particular point in time. So you can see that the president of the United States visiting Japan, there'll be a lot of pronouncements coming out of that. So, be tuned in for that. We'll talk about what the fallout is in the next week. And he's expected to leave on, I think, Wednesday morning. It could be Thursday night, but it's a very big schedule for him and also for Mr. Kishida. For the COVID update, I'm sure everybody has been watching that. I think the Japanese government has come to terms with the fact that the economy is just suffering way too badly, and the restrictions have been tight. They've been the tightest in all of the G20 countries. The Japanese are kind of on the bell curve on this side of being very, very strict with regard to restrictions with regard to tourists coming in, travelers, that sort of thing. And I think they've reached the conclusion that the economy is just in such bad shape with the inflation going on, with the war in Ukraine and the energy prices. They just can't survive that anymore. And I think they're biting the bullet and saying, let's just get the economy going back again. So currently, the number of visitors allowed into Japan is 20,000 per day. And what they've tested this out. They understand that the testing facilities for COVID and for the applying the test and for inoculating people if that's necessary, the capacity is about 20,000 per day. So what they're going to do is they're going to begin to allow people from certain countries to come in without testing. So if you've got friends that have been coming in over the last couple of months, you've heard complaints about how long it takes to get into Narita, how long it takes to get your luggage and get out of the airport. And also, earlier, you had to be quarantined. That is all going out the window. They're going to separate into 3 different blocks countries who can visit Japan. So in the first block, this is kind of like the most favored nation. These are countries who have the lowest preponderance of COVID. They've got good data on inoculations. Most of the people have had their 3rd booster shot, that sort of thing. This block consists of about 100 nations, and they will be able to get a pass through without quarantine, without COVID testing. They need to have the proof of a COVID test, I think, 72 hours before they get on the airplane. But once they get through, normally people who are in this category, countries that are in this category, they have already received their 3rd booster shot, and they're giving them a pass. Come on in through. So they won't need to go through that capacity channel that Japan is suffering with right now. Then the second group and the third group, the second group is they have some COVID incidents. It's somewhat worrisome. And then the third part is they have high incidence of COVID, but they can still come in. All 3 categories can still come into Japan. On a testing basis, on a kind of trial basis, starting this month, tour group operators, specific tour group operators, can bring in groups of tourists who have signed up to visit Japan, and they follow a routine. They go to Kyoto for 3 days, they go to Osaka for 2 days, they go to Tokyo for 2 days of shopping. It's all in a group. They're tightly controlled as normally this sort of thing is run, and then they go back to their home countries. These kinds of tour groups have a special category starting this month. It will bleed over a little bit into June, and in June, I think the second wave, the lowering of the restrictions will start probably in the first or the second week. So be looking forward to that. I think within a very short period of time, certainly before the elections of July 10th, more tourists should be coming in, more business should be, you've noticed it over the last couple of days, I'm sure, if you live in Tokyo, the vast number of people who are out on the streets. It was a nice day yesterday, it was a nice day on Friday. People just can't wait to get out. And it is generating quite a buzz in the economy. The Tokyo Metropolitan Government has noticed that. The central government has noticed that. So it's very good news for us. On the other hand, the economy is not doing very well. There are a couple of worrisome things going on, not just in Japan, but globally. The wheat shortage, the fact that India is not going to be exporting any wheat whatsoever. And that's not just because they're hoarding it, that's just because they're having difficulty in producing it. There's a bit of a drought going on there. And also the very, very scary things that are going on in Sri Lanka. So they've had, I think, another government upset, and the prime minister resigned. The new prime minister, his 6th time as prime minister, just took office. They've had riots. It's just a really terrible situation. You don't hear that much about it. You just maybe every once in a while you hear a story, but this is a huge deal, and it's somewhat, I don't know, it's somewhat suggestive of what is possible, not only throughout the region, but particularly here in Japan. You know, Japan imports most of its food stuff and almost all of its energy. And the fact that the energy costs and the food costs, the wholesale prices have increased 10% from a year ago this month. So wholesale food prices just in a 12-month period have risen 10%, but probably it's a little bit optimistic. I think it's probably more than that. And the signs are not very good that it's going to slow down or that it's going to get any better. Similarly, the value of the yen continues to weaken at the same time that the value of the dollar continues to go up. There's a real tension between what the Fed is doing in the United States and what the Bank of Japan is doing in Japan. The finance minister is really busy trying to talk with the G7 countries about let's all stick to that agreement we had on keeping yen, the currency fluctuations really in tab. We need to follow those agreements that we made, right, guys? Because Japan is like I said, an outlier here, and the pressure on the yen. There's a lot of analysis going on. Sagakibara, who was assistant finance minister during the Clinton years, actually, Mr. Yen, he's called, made a pronouncement just over the weekend that said, it's possible that the yen could go to 150 to the dollar, and probably in that case, you can expect some action from the Bank of Japan. That's astounding. It has touched 130. It's a little bit less than 130 to the dollar now, but to go up another, 30% to 150, that is quite alarming, and the prospects of it happening are very high. So you can see that the pressure for the Kishida administration is to get the economy going. They just passed the provisional supplementary budget. We've been talking about that. It's a 2 trillion yen a supplementary budget. Remember, Komeito was insisting that the LDP pass this. Don't wait until after the elections. Do it now. The LDP said, look, we're kind of busy now. We're really focused on the elections. Would prefer to push it back. They lost that. Of course, they got concessions for it, but the agreement between Komeito and the LDP was, okay, let's pass that supplemental budget right now. So they finished their draft this week. They're offering it up to the House. It will go under deliberations under the recommendation of the cabinet. And then I think on, let me see, when is it? It's the session. This session of the Diet ends on June 10th. That gives us 30 days before the election of the upper house. So the Diet finishes on June 10th, and I think they're going to pass this supplemental budget maybe June 2nd or something like that. So the timing is very, very tight, and it's an extremely busy time for people who are working Japanese politics. Some of the problems with the economy is that all of the energy costs, all of the energy needs are coming from outside. Japan receives all of their LNG gas from overseas. In a hierarchy, they get it from Australia, Malaysia, Qatar, the US, and Russia. The US provides about 9.8%, and Russia provides about 8.2%. And they're taking the Russian part out. So they're going to stop trading LNG, the oil that they receive from the Gazprom, the Sakhalin project will continue for an indefinite period, but there's a lot of consternation there. The problem, I mean, you can just test it out with just the LNG, which provides not as much of a mix as the petroleum does, or even coal, but where are they going to fill that gap in? The United States is already providing 9.9%. Take out 8% that is provided by the Russians. How do you backfill that? So that's one of the other issues that it will be on the table in discussion while President Joe Biden is in town. The Japanese are relying on the United States to kind of fill in that gap. And the United States, as you know, has its own problems. Mr. Biden, on his policy of becoming president, wanted to go with the Green Deal. He wanted to reduce America's footprint in carbon. He had a very aggressive goal for that. He's actually signed several presidential proclamations to reduce oil production and exploration. So the United States is also in a bit of a bind, and providing other people who are reliant on the United States, following their direction, their their uh, advice and counsel on how to deal with the Ukrainian situation and how to, incorporate all of the sanctions against Russia to force a resolution there. It does produce repercussions, and so the United States is in a bit of a bind. Japan is in a bit of a bind. Who knows how that is going to kind of uh, parcel out? So the 2.1 trillion draft went to the diet today this week, and I think you can expect that to be passed in the diet uh, probably in the first week of June. The Bank of Japan is sticking to its guns on 2%. Mr. Kuroda, who is the chairman of the Bank of Japan, he has one more year until April of next year in his term. He is very dedicated to a looser monetary policy and is still continuing to push that. The United States, on the other hand, is a very tight monetary policy. So there's a little bit of clash of cultures there, and the repercussions of that clash also impacts the economy and the value of the Japanese yen. So um, there's um, a lot of action with the group of seven on currency exchange, and also for keeping Japan, the economy buzzing. Part of the problem here is that in order to have people spend money, they have to, number one, have the money, but they also need to have confidence that the money can be spent. They have discretionary spending, and it's not going to impact them. It's not going to put them at risk if something else happens. And the problem is that people have this sense of foreboding gloom that it's not going to be getting better, and it's better that they hold on to their money. We had a bit of a discussion about this last week on the cusp of Mr. Kishida making his Six Nation tour during Golden Week. You might recall that he went to London. He had an important policy speech there where he revealed a little bit more about his new economy, what it means to be in the Kishida new economy. And part of that was that he acknowledges the tremendous wealth that is held in pillowcases and under mattresses and in bank accounts by Japanese people, mostly the elder people who have scrimped and saved, and just the propensity for saving here is very high in Japan, as you know. It's 2.1 trillion yen in stored up savings. He's trying to release that, and his idea was to have the people who are sitting on all of this money invest in stocks and bonds, particularly stocks that have a return on investment when things go well. Of course, they have a negative effect when they don't go well. And he's trying to get that money injected into the economy. And his idea is to have a vibrant stock market where innovation is occurring and where multiples of earnings are generated. I don't know how well that's going to work because even economists that look at that say, Japan has been very, very slow in producing unicorns, for example, or for even having venture funds available. So he wants to address that, and that's one of his ideas. Don't use government funds. Let's use everybody else's savings. I don't know how he's able to do that because people have the freedom of choice when they're spending their money, but you can foresee that probably tax policy will be implemented there to make people a little bit more enthusiastic about earning money rather than having to pay taxes or having a low return on money that they've kept in the bank. This money that is held in Japanese banks accounts is known as forced savings. That is the money that is being hoarded by people just because they feel uncertain about the future. If that sentiment doesn't change, we're going to still continue in this 20-year long deflationary period of Japan, and I think that just won't last. With Mr. Kishida, I think he's emboldened and he's committed to changing that. He wants to make sure that the middle class gets a little bit more action, gets a little bit more prosperity, probably at the cost of the big corporations. But he's also looking at innovation. So After this election in July 10th, you can expect a lot of things going on. Some of them will be well received, and some of them will just be kind of head scratchers. So it remains to be seen. All eyes are on the election for July 10th. You're not going to see anything that's going to be upsetting people's uh, idea about how the government is being run, what Mr. Kishida is doing. His approval ratings still continue to be high. So he's on a bit of a run, and you can expect that that's going to continue. The visit of the President of the United States here is also a huge boost for Kishida and for his cabinet. So you can anticipate there'll be a lot of news about that, a lot of fanfare, as it should be. You might remember that there is a large security conference held every year known as the Shangri-La Dialogue. This year, it happens just next month, the Prime Minister has announced that he will attend and have a keynote speech at this dialogue. It hasn't been held for the last 2 years because of COVID restrictions. So it's going to be a really big event this year. But the fact that Mr. Kishida is going to go there and make a keynote speech is a really big deal. It's a big deal for a couple of reasons. Number one, no prime minister has visited or appeared at the Shangri-La summit since 2014. That was Mr. Abe. So it's been really kind of pushed in the background, especially Japan's stance and pronouncements with regard to its military and the amount of money and how it's going to protect itself and project its defense capabilities. That has always been kept kind of quiet. And now with the election of Mr. Kishida and I think just a lot of the geopolitical things that are going on, Japan has taken a different stance. You might remember that they have decided they're going to have 2% of the GDP dedicated to military spending now. The first strike capability, something that is very unusual, is being considered roundly now. It was debated in the Diet just this last week. The question being discussed on the Diet floor was, are these initiatives being generated with a potential attack on China in mind? That was the question. And so there was a lot of debate going on there. I think primarily it is not. I think primarily it is with regard to North Korea. And with regard to North Korea, with the visit of the President of the United States to South Korea for 2.5 days, 3 days, there was so much concern that would be an opportunity used by North Korea to do yet another test or to do something provocative. They've already released a lot of evidence that they're starting the nuclear reactor that was in mothball for the last 10 years. Evidence is now arising that they're restarting that. And if they do that, it's about a 50 megawatt facility that is nuclear, producing electricity, but also produces plutonium, probably about 50 kilograms of nuclear usable material. And that's enough, they say, to build about 12 nuclear weapons within a year. So this is very worrying. I had anticipated something provocative coming from North Korea. It hasn't happened yet. We still got a couple of days later, but it is something that is in line with what we've experienced in the past and the character of our great leader in North Korea. Excuse me. So we're keeping a close eye on that. Also, the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the chief of that agency visited Japan this last week to review what's going on in Fukushima. The reason why this is important is because, for a couple of reasons, but the Japanese regulators over TEPCO, over the release of the water, what's going on, how that waste is being handled, passed a revisionary bill this last week to allow for the release of the water that's being accumulated and stored in Fukushima. I'm sure you've all seen the huge tanks, and they just keep growing up the hillside. Um, they can't release it. They don't know what to do with it. They kind of do know what to do with it, but it's just been accumulating there for 10 years. They are going to start releasing this next year in April. So he came to review those plans. He went to Fukushima, and he's kind of standing in the position of a arbiter or as an endorser of what the Japanese are doing. Apparently, because there's so much perhaps suspicion that maybe the Japanese won't do it the right way, and so as a more highly evaluated authority, the IAEA will be here to provide advice and counsel and also to endorse how it's being done. So they're moving very quickly towards building the pipelines that will take the wastewater from the tanks and begin dumping those into the water, the seawater, in April of next year. Sorry about the background sound. So you're going to find out that that's more and more in the news. China and some of the other Southeast Asia countries are very upset about that, especially the fishery industries are upset that the nuclear waste is going to affect them. China still is not opening negotiations with Japan on the import of food from Fukushima and several surrounding prefectures. They just aren't having the meetings. We've received accommodations in South Korea and in Taiwan, so a lot of the fruit and a lot of the food stuff is being exported there, but China is digging their feet in and holding it very, very tightly. There are a lot of other things going on. Let me just touch on Okinawa. You might remember that last week was the revision, the 50th the 50th anniversary of the revision of Okinawa. Prime Minister Kishida did in fact visit Okinawa with a view towards expanding economic development there. It is the poorest of all prefectures, you might recall. It's got the highest rate of unemployment. It's got the longest longevity. It's got the highest rate of children per capita, but the economy there is really bad. It is also hosting, 70% of American bases, although Okinawa consists of less than 1% of the total landmass of Japan. So there's a lot of tension going on there. Mr. Kishida went down there to renew his promise that we're going to support economic development and huge infrastructure projects to build it up. He has made commitments that he will take GDP from 4.1 trillion to 5.7 trillion for the prefecture. And for employment, he will take it from 3.6% unemployment to 2.5. And for basic income, per capita income per person in Okinawa, he's going to take that from 2.1 million yen per year to 2.9 million per year. These numbers, I don't know, they're good, they're bad, they're aggressive, they're not aggressive, but it's a carrot to be held out to the people who live in Okinawa to have more hope and encouragement for the future. But more importantly, it is because the election for governor, the re-election for governor, is in August. So these carrots are being held out so that the candidate endorsed by the LDP, of which Mr. Tamaki was not, or he's fallen out of favor after his original election. We've got the base from the Marine base moving from central Sukuran into Henoko. They're building that base there. They're dumping a lot of land into the sea to build this base there to move the forces there. That is still having stops and goes because of the governor. The central government doesn't like that. They want somebody who's a little bit more malleable, a little bit more following the dictates of the Kishida administration. So there is some tension there, and you can anticipate that this governor's race in August will be hotly contested. So stay tuned for that. Just there are a couple of odds and ends that I'd like to share with you. There's a lot of things going on that pick my interest and are indicative of what's going on in the economy, what's going on with Japanese culture, with people, that sort of thing. And they're not always policy related, but they have implications for that. And sometimes they're just quirky, funny things that happen. So, for example, in Yamaguchi, there was a mistake at a local prefectural office. They were supposed to send 100,000 yen to the people who are qualified as kind of disadvantaged or lower income. And they had about 463 people who were in that category. And the prefectural government decided that these people in this township were going to get this money, and they began to send it out. Um, Somebody hit the wrong button and sent all of the money to one account. A young kid by the name of, what's his name? Sho Taguchi. His name wasn't released for quite a few days while they were doing their investigation, but they sent it to the wrong. They just missent it. They sent everything to this poor kid. Um, what's the amount? It's about 46 million yen. He woke up one day and it was in his account. It's about $350,000. So what this kid did is he just went out and spent it, and he went on a lavish spending spree, but mostly um, gambling, internet gambling. And when they found out the mistake and they reached out to him, first of all, he ran away and hid. They finally got him, and they've conducted an investigation. He says he's not going to return the money because it kind of wasn't his fault. They've arrested him just this, I think on Friday, they finally arrested him. If anything like that happens to you that are living in Japan, it does happen. I've been called by friends and clients that a mistake was made, and what do I do with this money? You're supposed to return it. Of course, this is Japan, so it doesn't always happen that way. But this poor kid is now going to go to jail. That money is non-retrievable. It looks like that's what he did with it. He just made internet gambling, thinking that he would make a killing, as the savvy investor that he was, 24 years old. Bunshun did a huge hit piece on him, revealed that he was in a kind of a bike gang and smoking marijuana and just not being able to keep a job. But this is a huge issue for him. I think you probably, if there was more comedy in Japan, there's not a lot of satire that is political commentary like you get in the United States or in some of the other countries. But it sure would be great fodder to explore that. Anyway, there's a lot of other things to talk about. I hope I've hit the high points for you and it generates some questions and some remarks. Otherwise, I have to deal with Maya's questions, and she's been thinking about them all week. So please, if you have issues, or if you just want to talk about something else that we haven't explored, uh, let's talk about it on Clubhouse. Maya?
Yes, thank you, Timothy. You are right. Yes, I have been thinking about this always. Yes. So you are right, about this, and I cannot wait for you to get over to Clubhouse so that I can torture you with the questions. But I also very much hope that other people will join us and share their observations and comments as well. So, well, I'll let you go now from
Good.
StreamYard. Yes, and
Let's have a good discussion on that.
definitely yes. So thank you, and
Okay.
well, be careful when you switch
I'll
platforms.
see you on the other side. Thank you. Thank you,
Yes,
everybody.
see you there. Thank you.